People ask me all the time what happens when you die, and they expect some kind of mystical answer, some reassurance about the afterlife or consciousness floating away to somewhere nice. But I am going to tell you what really happens, and it is far more interesting than any story anybody ever made up. It is also, in a strange way, more beautiful. When you die, your atoms do not die. That is the first thing you have to understand. You are made of atoms, every single piece of you, your bones, your blood, the neurons firing in your brain right now as you listen to this, all atoms. And atoms do not care whether they are part of you or part of a rock or part of the air. They are just doing their thing, bouncing around, interacting, following the laws of physics. They have no loyalty to you. They were not created for you. They were here long before you showed up, and they will be here long after you are gone. So what happens when you die is really quite simple from the atomic point of view. The complicated organization that makes you, falls apart. The structure collapses. See, you are not really a thing, you are a pattern, a very specific arrangement of atoms that knows how to do something remarkable, which is to keep itself going for a while. Your body knows how to take in food and water and air, break it all down, use the atoms and energy to repair itself, to move, to think. It is like a flame. A flame is not a thing either. It is a process. The atoms in a flame are constantly changing, new oxygen coming in, carbon dioxide going out, but the pattern, the process, stays the same. You are like that. The atoms that make up your body right now are not the same atoms that were there 7 years ago. They have been replaced slowly, continuously, but the pattern persists until it does not. When you die, that pattern stops being maintained. The chemical reactions that kept you organized, that kept your heart beating and your brain firing, they stop. And once they stop, the second law of thermodynamics takes over. Entropy increases. Disorder wins. Your body starts to break down, and this is not mysterious, it is chemistry. Bacteria, the ones that were always there in your gut, they start breaking down your cells. Enzymes that were held in check start digesting tissues. Your atoms start to drift apart, to become part of other things. Some get eaten by bacteria and end up in the soil. Some evaporate, water molecules leaving your body. Some get taken up by plants, some by insects. The carbon that was in your muscles might end up in a tree. The calcium in your bones might dissolve and flow into groundwater. The iron in your blood might rust away into the earth. Now here's the thing that gets me. Those atoms, every single one of them, they are ancient. The hydrogen in your body, that was made in the Big Bang, about 13.8 billion years ago. Most of the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, the stuff you are mostly made of, that was cooked up inside stars that lived and died before our sun even existed. Stars are factories, you see. They take hydrogen and smash it together under tremendous heat and pressure, fusion, and they build heavier elements, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, iron, all of it made in the cores of stars. And then when those stars run out of fuel, they explode, supernovae, and they scatter all those atoms out into space. And those atoms drift around in clouds of gas and dust until gravity pulls them together again into new stars, new planets, our planet, you. So every atom in your body has a history that goes back billions of years. The oxygen you are breathing right now, it has been breathed by countless other creatures before you. The carbon in your bones, it was once in a dinosaur maybe, or in a fern in a primordial forest, or in the ocean, dissolved as carbon dioxide. Atoms get recycled. That is what the universe does. Nothing is ever really created or destroyed, not in the sense that it vanishes. It just changes form. And when you die, your atoms continue that cycle. They do not disappear. They become part of the great churning mixing pot of the earth. They become part of the biosphere again. And some of those atoms, there is a pretty good chance, will end up in another living thing. Maybe a tree, maybe a mushroom, maybe another person someday. You are made of recycled star stuff, and when you die, you get recycled too. That is not poetic language. That is just the physics. Now, what about energy? People talk about energy a lot when they talk about death. They say, oh, energy cannot be destroyed, so your energy must go somewhere. And they are right about the first part. Energy is conserved. That is one of the most fundamental laws of physics. But they are confused about what that means. Your energy does not go floating off to some other realm. It just spreads out. It dissipates. See, while you are alive, you are taking in energy mostly from food, which is just stored sunlight if you trace it back. Plants capture sunlight and turn it into chemical energy, sugars, and starches. And then you eat the plants, or you eat something that ate the plants, and you break those chemicals down and use the energy to keep your pattern going, to move, to think, to maintain your body temperature. But you are not perfectly efficient. No machine is. Most of that energy ends up as heat. You radiate heat all the time. That is why you are warm. That is energy leaving your body, spreading out into the environment. When you die, that process stops. You stop taking in energy, and the energy that was stored in your body, the chemical potential energy, in all those organic molecules, that gets released as your body decomposes. Bacteria break down your tissues and use that energy for themselves, and they release heat. Everything becomes heat eventually. That is the tendency of the universe. Heat is just the random motion of atoms, and the second law says that things tend toward more randomness, more disorder, higher entropy. So your energy spreads out. It becomes the kinetic energy of atoms bouncing around in the soil and the air, warming the environment by an immeasurably tiny amount. It does not vanish. It just becomes less useful, less organized. It becomes part of the background. Now let me tell you about the part that people find hardest to accept. What about consciousness? What about you, the thing that feels like it is you, the voice in your head, the sense of being someone looking out through your eyes? What happens to that? And here's where I have to be very honest with you. We do not know everything about consciousness. It is one of the great mysteries still. But we know enough to say some things pretty confidently. Consciousness, as far as we can tell, is what it feels like to be a functioning brain. It is the pattern of neural activity, billions of neurons firing in very specific ways, creating thoughts, memories, sensations, emotions. It is an emergent property of a complex physical system. And the evidence for this is overwhelming. When you change the brain, you change consciousness. Give someone a drug, their consciousness changes. Damage a part of the brain, you lose a specific function. There is a famous case. A guy named Phineas Gage had an iron rod go through his frontal lobe in an accident, survived, but his personality completely changed. He was not the same person anymore, because the physical structure that created his personality, that was damaged. Consciousness depends on the brain. It is not something separate floating around that just happens to be connected to the brain. It is what the brain does. So when you die and your brain stops working, consciousness stops. The pattern of activity that was you, that created your sense of self, that ends. It is like a song. When the orchestra stops playing, the music stops. The instruments are still there, the atoms are still there, but the pattern, the organization, the process, that was the music, that is gone. You cannot point to where the music went. It did not go anywhere. It just stopped happening. And I know that is hard. It is hard because we have this deep intuition that we are somehow separate from our bodies, that the real us is something immaterial, something that could, in principle, exist without the physical brain. But that intuition, as powerful as it is, does not match what we observe. Every time we look closely at the brain, we find that mental phenomena correspond to physical phenomena. There is no evidence for anything else. Does that mean death is the end? Yes, in the sense that the pattern that is you, your specific consciousness, your memories, your personality, that does not continue. But no, in the sense that the atoms that made you, they continue. The energy that powered you, it continues, just in a different form. You are a temporary pattern in the eternal dance of atoms. You arise, you persist for a while, and then you dissolve back into the mix. And new patterns arise from that same material. There's something I find very moving about this. You are not separate from the universe. You are a part of it, literally. You are made of the same stuff as stars, as planets, as every living thing that ever existed. And when you die, you do not leave the universe. You just rejoin it in a different form. Your atoms will be part of the ongoing story of the cosmos. Some of them might end up in the ocean. Some might be taken up by a tree and end up in a leaf. And that leaf might fall and decay and feed the soil, and a flower might grow there. And someone might see that flower and think it is beautiful, and in a very real physical sense, you are part of that beauty. Now people ask me, does not that make life meaningless? If we are just temporary patterns of atoms, if consciousness is just brain activity and it ends when we die, what is the point? And I think that is exactly backwards. The fact that we are temporary makes life more precious, not less. You have this brief window, this tiny slice of time, where the universe has organized itself into a pattern that can look around and understand itself. That is what you are. You are the universe becoming aware of itself, at least for a moment. And the fact that it ends, that does not diminish it. A beautiful sunset is not less beautiful because it only lasts a few minutes. A piece of music is not less moving because it comes to an end. The temporariness is part of what makes it meaningful. If you lived forever, nothing would have urgency, nothing would be precious. It is because we have limited time that time has value. And here's another thing. The atoms that make you, they are going to be part of other things, other patterns, other processes. In a way, you are contributing to the future. The carbon that is in your body right now, it is going to be part of the earth, part of the cycle of life, potentially for billions of years. Long after any memory of you as an individual is gone, your atoms will still be here, doing interesting things. That is a kind of immortality, not the kind where you personally persist, but the kind where you are woven into the fabric of the world. Let me tell you about the atoms themselves, because this is really the key to understanding what happens when you die. An atom is mostly empty space. If you could blow up an atom to the size of a football stadium, the nucleus would be like a marble in the center, and the electrons would be tiny specks orbiting way out in the stands. But that tiny nucleus, that is where almost all the mass is. Protons and neutrons packed together incredibly densely. And those protons and neutrons, they are made of quarks, held together by the strong force. And this is where it gets really interesting. The forces that hold atoms together, the electromagnetic force between electrons and nuclei, the strong force holding the nucleus together, these are quantum mechanical. They do not behave like anything in our everyday experience. An electron does not orbit the nucleus like a planet orbits the sun. It exists in a kind of probability cloud, a wave function, and it is spread out over a region of space. It does not have a definite position until you measure it. This is not a limitation of our knowledge. This is the nature of reality at the quantum level. The electron really is in multiple places at once, in a sense. And when atoms interact, when they form molecules, when they participate in the chemical reactions that make up life, they are following the rules of quantum mechanics. Every bond in your DNA, every enzyme catalyzing a reaction in your cells, that is quantum mechanics in action. You are a macroscopic quantum phenomenon. Most people think quantum mechanics only matters for tiny things, particles in accelerators or electrons in atoms, but it matters for you. You would not exist without it. The stability of atoms, the way they combine into molecules, the fact that chemistry works at all, that is all quantum mechanics. So when you die and your atoms scatter, they do not lose their quantum nature. They keep following the same rules. An oxygen atom that was in your lungs, when it drifts away and becomes part of the atmosphere, it is still the same kind of oxygen atom, still behaving quantum mechanically. And eventually it might be breathed in by someone else, or taken up by a plant during photosynthesis, and it becomes part of a new pattern, a new living thing. There is a calculation you can do that I find remarkable. The number of atoms in a human body is about 10 to the 28th power, give or take. That is a huge number, 10 with 28 zeros after it. The number of atoms in the entire Earth's atmosphere is about 10 to the 44th. So if you assume that atoms mix randomly over time, you can calculate the probability that any given breath you take contains atoms that were once in the body of some historical figure. Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, Shakespeare, anybody who lived long enough ago that their atoms have had time to spread out and mix into the biosphere. And the answer is, it is almost certain. Every breath you take contains millions of atoms that were once in Julius Caesar, or Cleopatra, or any other historical figure you want to name. The math is straightforward. The atoms have had 2,000 years to spread out, to be recycled through the oceans, the soil, the air. They are everywhere now. You are breathing in the past with every breath. You are made of the past, and someday someone will be made of you. This is not mysticism. This is just combinatorics and chemistry. But it is profound. It means we are all connected, not in some vague spiritual sense, but in a very literal, physical sense. The boundaries between individuals, between species, between the living and the dead, these are temporary. The atoms flow through all of us. We are part of a continuous process that has been going on for billions of years and will continue for billions more. Now, what about the energy? Let me be more precise about this because people get confused. Energy is not a substance, it is a property. It is the ability to do work, to cause change, and it comes in different forms. Kinetic energy, the energy of motion, potential energy, stored energy that could be released, chemical energy, which is really just a form of potential energy stored in the bonds between atoms, thermal energy, which is the random kinetic energy of atoms jiggling around. While you are alive, your body is constantly converting energy from one form to another. You eat food, which contains chemical energy. Your digestive system breaks it down, and your cells use that energy to synthesize ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is like the energy currency of the cell. When a cell needs energy, it breaks down ATP and releases that energy to power whatever process needs to happen. Muscle contraction, nerve signaling, protein synthesis, all of it powered by this constant flow of energy. But here is the thing, at every step of the way, some energy is lost as heat. Not lost in the sense that it vanishes, but lost in the sense that it becomes less useful, less organized. It spreads out into the environment. This is the second law of thermodynamics again. Every energy conversion increases the total entropy of the universe. You cannot avoid it. It is built into the fabric of reality. So when you die, the organized flow of energy stops. Your cells stop making ATP. The chemical energy stored in your tissues starts to be released, but not in a controlled way. Bacteria and enzymes break things down, and that releases energy as heat. Your body cools down to the temperature of the environment as that energy dissipates. Eventually, all the chemical energy that was stored in your body gets converted to heat and spreads out. It becomes part of the thermal background of the planet. And that energy, in a sense, is still there. It has not been destroyed, but it is no longer available to do useful work. It is maximally spread out, maximally disordered. That is the ultimate fate of all energy in the universe, by the way. Heat death. Eventually, if the universe keeps expanding, everything will spread out and cool down until there are no temperature differences anywhere, no gradients, no way to do work, no way for anything interesting to happen. That is trillions and trillions of years in the future, but it is where the second law is taking us. But let me get back to you, because we are not talking about the heat death of the universe. We are talking about your death, which is much sooner and much more personal. The point I want to make is this. Physically, what happens when you die is completely understood. It is not mysterious. It is chemistry and thermodynamics. Your atoms disperse. Your energy dissipates. The pattern that was you dissolves, and that is it. There is no evidence for anything else. No soul leaving the body, no consciousness persisting without a brain, no energy going to another dimension. Those are stories we tell ourselves because the truth is hard to accept. But here's what I find amazing. Even though it is hard, even though it means we do not get to live forever, the truth is more interesting than the stories. The fact that you are made of atoms from dead stars, the fact that those atoms are temporary, organized into something that can think and feel and understand the universe. The fact that this organization is so improbable and so delicate and so brief, that makes it extraordinary. You are not a static thing. You are a process, a flame that burns for a while and then goes out. And while you are burning, you get to experience the universe. You get to see a sunset, taste food, hear music, think about the nature of reality. That is a gift. It does not last forever, but it does not need to. And when you die, you return to the pool of atoms and energy from which you came. You give back what you borrowed. Your atoms will be part of new things, new patterns, new processes. The universe will continue its dance, and you will be part of it, just not as you. Not as a conscious observer, but as the raw material from which new observers might arise. There is a kind of comfort in that, I think. You are not separate. You are not alone. You are part of something vast and ancient and ongoing. You always have been, even before you were born. The atoms that make you were scattered across the galaxy, in nebulae, in the bodies of other stars, in planets that no longer exist. And then, through a series of incredibly improbable events, they came together in just the right way to make something that could ask what happens when you die. And the answer is, the atoms continue. The energy continues. But the pattern, the specific organization that is you, that ends, it is like a wave on the ocean. The wave rises, it moves across the water, it crashes on the shore, and it is gone. But the water is still there, the ocean continues, and new waves will form. You are a wave, a temporary disturbance in the field of atoms and energy that makes up the universe. And when your wave crashes, the ocean goes on. I do not find that depressing. I find it beautiful. It means that right now, at this moment, you are part of the most extraordinary process in the universe. You are matter becoming conscious of itself. You are the universe asking questions about itself. And that is not diminished by the fact that it is temporary. If anything, it is made more precious. So what happens when you die? Your atoms scatter and become part of the world again. Your energy dissipates and becomes part of the background heat of the universe, the pattern that is you, your consciousness, your sense of self that ends. And the universe continues, carrying forward the atoms that were you, using them to build new things, new patterns, new moments of beauty and complexity and understanding. That is what happens, and it is enough.